Gamescom is over now, and we learned some more about Funcom's Dune Awakening. Now, I know that some of you might not have this game on your list, but I think it is going to be a fun game with an interesting story. So let's take a look at an interview that took place.
Awaken.
You begin as a nameless prisoner. Sculpt your appearance, choose your background, and then crash into the planet. You are abandoned and alone. Hunted by sandworms. Scorched by the unforgiving sun. Ravaged by sunstroke. Stick to the shade. Chase the moving shadows. Survive. Welcome to Arrakis, the most dangerous planet in the universe. Meet hundreds of other players in the vast online world. Befriend or betray those you meet. Form a wary alliance, in this case, a spit dart rifle and a still suit, for your help taking down territorial deserters. Working with others will always increase your chance of staying alive. The Deserter Base. Climb to a vantage point and prepare for violence. Your choice of weapons and abilities determines your strategy. Swordmasters lead the charge into battle, literally. Repel ranged attacks with a shield and then take them out, one by one. Deploy the Hunter-Seeker and kill from the shadows. Take what you can from the fallen. On Arrakis, nothing of value is wasted. Mine, harvest, and gather with your group to build bases and unlock more advanced equipment, like the Blood Purifier. Refine the blood you collected from your enemies to extract drinkable water. Craft improved equipment using fabricators. Replicate your bases in new locations with the blueprint system, and then sell blueprints of your architectural wonders to other players. Lead your group to become a guild. On Arrakis, a nameless prisoner can rise. Construct an ornithopter and take to the air. The world is yours to claim.
This is Dune Man Keith Filari reminding you to vary your route. Return with the full spy slot. My crew found a shortcut would become comfortable.
The in-game radio provides insight into key events happening across Arrakis. Map the desert. Discover landmarks, wrecked ships, and desert testing stations filled with forgotten technology. Arrakis is a vast planet. You can explore unique locations, uncover valuable resources, and search for secrets amongst the shifting dunes. And then, return to civilization triumphant with what you found. Harko Village throngs with people, spice traders, guild bankers, smugglers, house envoys, and of course, other players. Here, you will pledge allegiance to one of the great houses of Dune, the Harkonnen. But remember, to play politics, you need power. And on Arrakis, spice is power. In the deep desert beyond the shield wall, hundreds of players scour the landscape, hunting for spice. Every spice blow has the potential to become a heated battle, with multiple guilds vying for the precious melange. Even when it looks like defeat is inevitable, those who understand desert power can awaken Arrakis itself.
The IGN crew spoke with Joel Bylos, creative director for Dune Awakening. The first question asked was, how does the team describe this game?
Yeah, so it sort of starts off with this really strong survival angle. Like, I consider it like a V shape. You start in the focused survival part of the V, and then you move up and it becomes more of political survival, social, MMO, working with other players, working with large guilds. The initial premise of the game was just, hey, how do we take a survival game and give it a good end game? And the conclusion to that in June was like political survival, big world, you know?
So it's a survival MMO, but it has more depth than just the basics that you would find in any other MMO. I still have some questions as to what they mean by political survival, but it does sound interesting nonetheless. The next question asked where Dune Awakening falls in the franchise lore.
Yeah, so we worked with the Herbert Estate and we sort of went with like this alternate universe where Paul, instead of Paul being born, Jessica followed her orders from the Bene Gesserit, gave birth to a daughter, right? And then that shifts the landscape of everything. So we kind of did this for two reasons. One, it sets up the ability to have Harkonnen and Atreides on the planet fighting each other. It also means that people who've read the books and seen the movies have something to look forward to in our game because there's something slightly different about it, right?
Okay, so it's kind of like a what-if scenario. That's cool.
So the game is basically an alternate story, but it keeps the rest of the lore within the greater universe. This certainly does give a new way to see Dune. The next question asked how the game tackles the more supernatural aspects of the Dune universe.
So, I mean, like, Spice has its own kind of special stuff going on, and I probably shouldn't spoil too much, but it's cool if you take enough Spice. Things will happen.
Okay,
and,
interesting.
And then the Bene Gesserit themselves, like the Mentats, all of these kind of special things from the universe, you can learn them as archetypes. You can meet trainers in the world who will teach you a little bit of the ability. Like, you can't really become a Bene Gesserit, but you can learn some of their abilities. You can learn to use the voice, and then you can use that, say, in combat to compel an enemy to come charging at you, right? Or you can use it to make people not see you. You can tell them, like, ignore me.
Okay.
And they won't pay attention to you for a little while. So, yeah, it's kind of, that's how we built it into the game.
Okay, so you can learn new abilities and even will have things happen when you take enough spice. I wonder just what happens. Guess we'll have to wait and see. Which happens to lead us right into the next question that got asked, which was, what does spice do in the game?
Yeah, it's kind of spice is kind of at the heart of everything, right? Like, so first of all, when you come to Arrakis, your character isn't really that used to spice. So after a little while, they start to have, you know, a moment, right? Paul has one like that in the movie as well. The player starts to have a little moment, and it sets him on this journey through the world. And so spice is kind of, it's there as like a guide, a spiritual guide. It works as like something that fuels your growth, your abilities. It also works as like a currency for which you pay tax to the Emperor for building on Arrakis, right? And it also works to bribe people in the political system. So spice has a lot of uses.
Obviously, spice is a major part of Dune, and so it also is a major part of the game. It does a variety of things from aiding your powers and abilities, but it is also used as a form of currency. Not surprising, given the nature of spice. The next question asked about water and how players get it.
Yeah, so we built in like a bunch of mechanics for getting water. Starting off, you're kind of scrabbling to survive, so you're sucking moisture out of plants because you're not Fremen, you don't know how to live here in the desert, right? But then over time you learn to like pull the blood out of your enemies, extract it, take it to a machine, purify it, then you start taking water from there. Eventually you get like a dew reaper, which allows you to sort of walk around sucking the water off plants, like wilting them as you go. And then eventually, you know, move up to the high levels of harvesting. Corpses to put in your death still to give you lots of water. So you are kind of moving through the progression of water in the game.
So there are a lot of ways to get water. Again, this is where the survival part comes into play. I hope it is not too forbidding, because that is my worry. The next question is one that speaks to me specifically. Joel was asked about the accommodations they are making for people who just want to play a Dune game and don't really care for the MMO aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, so we're trying to sort of
tutorialize well, explain to people the world. There's a little single-player section at the start of the game before you enter the main world. And in that single-player section, we teach you the basic mechanics. We teach you a little bit about the lore. We give you a story. And then we put you into the world and sort of have you survive. I mean, I don't think the game is going to be for everybody. If you hate survival games, it's not going to be a game that you want to play, right? Like, so I have to be clear about that. I don't like to sell games to people who don't want to play them. So, but at the end of the day, like, it's kind of, there's enough there. It's forgiving enough. You know, you learn the mechanics. You learn not to walk on the sand when the sandworm's around. You learn how to get water. You'll be fine.
That is why I like the Funcom team. They are aware of their audience and don't want to sell a game without people knowing what they are in for, at least as it pertains to Dune. That said, even though I am not one for PvP or hardcore survival types, I do plan to give this one a try. The next question was about walking, particularly walking the way the Fremen do.
You can't because you're not Fremen and you haven't learned it, but it is something that you can learn later in the game, hopefully, right? Like, so you get further into the game, maybe you learn some skills about this, but not in the beginning, right? Because, so some of our players in beta, they're like, oh, I'm walking like an idiot on the sand, I'm not using any rhythm, the sandworm still comes. I'm like, you don't know how to sandwalk, man.
Well, we can learn the walk, but it sounds like it is not going to be as easy to learn. That leads us right into the next question, which was about the worms.
Yeah, so the worms themselves, like, there's two sizes. We have the small worms, which are like this guy, and then we have the Shia, the really big chungus that comes out, you know. So the idea is that, like, yeah, when you're walking on the sand, you create vibrations every time you walk on the sand or drive or ride a vehicle or anything, right? The sandworm will always come. It's this huge AI that's moving around, so it's actually there in the world all the time. It's not something we spawn. It's not some scripted trick. It's following and listening, right? And it comes after players in the world. And then when you get to the deep desert, the harvesting areas, that's where the really big worms show up.
Okay, so these sandworms are always there and run off of AI. I wonder how that works in the game. Guess that also means I am going to be sticking close to the rocks. The next question moved into combat. Joel was asked about how they are striking a balance between ranged and melee.
Yeah, so Dune has a really interesting shield mechanic, right? And it's part of the lore that, like, shields basically rebuff all projectiles. So the way the game works is that we have this, enemies use shields, they use ranged. So it's kind of about getting in and out of combat very quickly, getting close to the people in melee, pulling back to use ranged on people who don't have shields. And then, of course, like, we have abilities which allow you to do this, to get in and out. I mentioned Compel, but there's things like the Shigawire Claw, which let you pull yourself into an enemy or force them to stumble. There's all sorts of stuff for moving around the battlefield. So, yeah, it's kind of this combined arms, we call it, this combination of melee, ranged, and abilities.
So combat sounds like it's complicated, but there are things that can help you depending on your abilities, skills, and class. The next question asked about traversal options like climbing and such.
Yeah, so the climbing is freeform, right? Like, we're sort of in Conan Exiles, we had like freeform climbing. In Dune, we have a sort of more advanced version of that where you can climb on anything, but in addition, you can use abilities or suspensor belts. So once you get a suspensor belt, you can kind of just fly, right? You see it in the movies as well. You just sort of fly around in the world as long as your power lasts. And then, yeah, obviously climbing is just freeform attached to a surface, start climbing.
Okay, so besides vehicles, climbing is a thing, as well as flight, as long as you have the proper equipment. The last question asked about early access and when people can get their hands on the game.
Yeah, so we're doing a persistent beta right now. We'll be adding thousands and thousands of more people to it as we progress towards the launch window, getting more people in to test the endgame systems and the large faction stuff. And then we're looking for an early, we're not saying early access, we're saying early 2025 launch window.
As we already knew, the game is in a closed beta right now, with more people being added incrementally to allow for proper playtesting and fleshing out of the endgame features. We also learned that the release timeframe has been narrowed down to early 2025. While we didn't see much in the way of new gameplay or in-game features, we did get some new information that helps paint the picture for what this game has in store for us. That said, I still have some questions of my own. Hopefully they will be answered in due time before launch. What do you think about Dune Awakening? Are you planning on playing it? Sound off in the comments below. While you're at it, like, subscribe, and share. And as always, I'm just glad you stopped by, and I'll see you in the next one.